faithfully sharing value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally with the Book Talk. Today, I'll interpret for you the book Persian Letters by Montesquieu, a French Enlightenment thinker. Many folks love traveling, especially going abroad, but when we dive into that fresh foreign vibe and face different cultures and customs, we don't forget our roots. We naturally compare what we see with back home. So, this kind of travel involves cultural self awareness, even a bit of enlightenment. Actually, the Persian letters we're discussing today uses the travels of two people in a foreign land to spark intellectual enlightenment. This is France's first Enlightenment novel and also one of the earliest epistolary ones. The main story follows two Persians traveling in France. They write over 100 letters to friends back home, sharing their thoughts and experiences. It compares French and Persian, Western and Eastern civilizations from angles like politics, religion, ethics, and customs. In the 18th century, when the novel came out, France's Enlightenment was in full swing. The author, Montesquieu, was a pioneer of the Enlightenment movement. He wrote this book to use the Persian perspective for exploring the pros and cons of European and Persian societies and reflecting on France's social state. That fresh viewpoint, rational approach, and exotic Persian flavor made it a breath of fresh air for French readers back then. Starting with this book, Montesquieu made studying global political civilizations his life's work, eventually writing The Spirit of the Laws, a classic in Western political thought, and pushing the Enlightenment to its peak in France. First off, let's tackle a question. Why did Montesquieu pick two Persians as the main characters? It's because through these fictional Persians, Montesquieu could speak more freely and without restraint. From Montesquieu's birth in 1689 to 1715, when Louis XIV died, France began declining from its height, with constant foreign wars, emptying treasury, public unrest, and worsening social morals. Back then, Montesquieu lived in Bordeaux, southern France, closely watching events filled with discontent and worry. But due to his noble status and tight connections to Paris high society, he couldn't openly criticize under his own name. So Montesquieu used these two Persians to critique French society. He chose Persia because it had over 2 millennia of history and was a coveted destination for many Western travelers back then. For example, the famous French jeweler Chardin visited Persia twice and wrote detailed travel journals. Montesquieu studied such travel writings to understand Persian life, customs, and psychology, crafting his Persian protagonists to write Persian letters. He then cautiously published it anonymously in Holland, where it caused a sensation. It's said many Dutch publishers grew jealous of the book's success, eagerly asking any author they met, "Hey, could you write me a sequel to Persian Letters?" The novel's huge fame quickly revealed the author's true identity. Suddenly, all of France was discussing the book, making Montesquieu a celebrity in literary and high society circles. The book's criticisms and satires didn't bring attacks, but instead fueled public enthusiasm. Now, let's explore the novel starting with its two protagonists. The first is Uzbek, a middle-aged Persian nobleman with a quiet, thoughtful nature. Most of the 161 letters are his. He lived in Isfahan, Persia's capital then, with 5 wives and hundreds of slaves. But in 1712, he left his entire household to travel to Paris with his friend Rika, where they stayed for 9 years. Over those 9 years, they traveled across France, documenting fresh observations in letters to distant friends. They discussed, among the 161 letters, many satirize European society, like mocking the French king and Pope, Europe's most powerful figures, with the 24th letter being especially famous. This was written by Rika a month after arriving in Paris, addressed to his friend in Turkey. As Louis XIV's reign neared its end, Rika noted France lacked Spain's gold mines, yet appeared wealthier. The king imposed heavy taxes to fill coffers, building palaces, expanding armies, and flaunting extravagance everywhere. The king was also arrogant, creating a cult of personality, practically making his subjects believe he could turn stone to gold. French subjects were also extremely vain, always wanting their nation to display sufficient grandeur. Actually, France's treasury was long depleted, yet everyone from top to bottom believed they were immensely wealthy and powerful. Next, Rika directed his satire toward the Pope. He said the French king could sway his subjects' thoughts, but the Pope? He could sway the king's mind, making him believe 3 = 1. He'd also tell the king that the bread people eat isn't bread, nor is the wine they drink actually wine. Because according to Catholicism, the bread represents Jesus' flesh and the wine represents his blood. Dear Rika questions Catholic doctrine, breaking religion's constraints on people while championing reason and science. This was precisely the Enlightenment's purpose. Here, Montesquieu reveals his Enlightenment thinker essence, while also satirizing various French social customs. For example, the 44th letter is from Uzbek to a Venetian friend. He writes that the French are very vain, love self-praise, and the upper class looks down on the lower. Within the same class or profession, people mutually despise each other. In letter 52, Rika describes meeting 4 women at a social event, 80, 60, 40, and just over 20. He found the 20-year-old mocked the 40-year-old, who mocked the 60-year-old, who mocked the 80-year-old, all ridiculing the older for wearing makeup and dressing up. Mika asks in the letter, must we forever build our happiness on despising others? Do we really need to fixate on others' flaws to feel happy? The letters also mock French arrogance. Many consider themselves knowledgeable, constantly theorizing about politics, yet accomplishing nothing practical. Many French enthusiastically write and compile books, yet these lack originality. Compilers merely patch things together, barely more skilled than printers. These 2 Persians also focused extensively on social ethics and morality. In their letters, they say, French people, men and women alike, are quite libertine, men prone to jealousy, women to coquetry. In letter 56, Uzbekistan mentions Parisian women's gambling addiction. He says these women drain their husbands dry. The young squander wildly in gambling, the middle-aged live wantonly, and the elderly lose everything. Compared to the French, we Persians are much better in this regard, because the Islamic prophet forbade us from gambling and drinking, keeping us clear-headed and able to control dangerous passions. Yet, Uzbek often reflects on Persia's problems too, deeply aware of its political and social decay. In the book's 8th letter, he explains why he left Persia. He entered the palace young and became its most virtuous and independent-minded figure. He spoke truth to the king's face, without flattery, never blindly worshipping idols like ordinary folk. But no one at court valued integrity. They envied and ostracized him instead. He had to leave the court, returning to the countryside to pursue scientific research. Knowing Europe led the world in science, he journeyed to France, Uzbek traveling west from the east. Passing through Ottoman cities, he saw decay everywhere. Nearing Europe, cities grew more prosperous. He lamented how the West had leaped ahead of the East. Civilizationally, France far surpassed Persia. Much of the Persians' dialogue shows admiration for France, especially Rika. In letter 24, he notes Paris buildings are taller than Isfahan's, Parisians more diligent. In Isfahan, life is slow-paced, with leisurely camel rides. In Paris, people not only walk, but stride swiftly. French men are healthier and freer than Persian men. French and Persian women each shine. Persian women are more beautiful, but French women possess enchanting charm. Rika reflects he never fit Persia's rhythm, but now feels somewhat at home. Actually, Montesquieu wasn't ranking France above Persia. These contrasts were his intellectual exercises. Montesquieu saw himself as a scientific researcher, believing people could understand human society through scientific inquiry, just like studying nature. The most meaningful research involves comparing institutions, customs, and cultures across nations horizontally. Thus, in Persian letters, besides France, Persia comparisons, Uzbek discusses Italian versus Persian slavery, Roman versus Persian populations, and explores underlying causes with friends. Montesquieu richly incorporated his knowledge of global customs in the book. This investigative spirit later shaped his magnum opus. Beyond conveying ideas through letters, Montesquieu meticulously depicted Persian aristocratic life. This exotic flavor showcased Montesquieu's literary talent and became key to attracting European readers. Half of Uzbek's letters discuss religion, ethics, customs, and philosophy with friends. The other half are family letters. Though absent from Persia for 9 years, he constantly managed household affairs. Through these letters, readers gradually uncover the conflicts unfolding in Uzbek's harem. Uzbek had 5 wives, one more than his lams permitted 4. He confessed to friends he'd lost desire for them, preferring exile while entrusting them to eunuchs, and a chief eunuch oversaw them, eunuchs being castrated slaves without sexual capacity. So, yet, Uzbek remained anxious, fearing scandals during his prolonged absence, and indeed trouble arose. Soon, wives, the chief eunuch, and others flooded him with letters about household troubles. Some pledged loyalty, others sounded alarms, many made accusations. For instance, when a eunuch died, the chief selected a replacement slave for castration. The slave refused. Both wrote to Uzbek, claiming loyalty while accusing each other. Uzbek then exempted the slave from castration. The stories of the 5 wives form the book's most brilliant literary chapters. One wife let her daughter's veil slip at the mosque, revealing her face. This violated Islamic law. Upon learning this, Uzbek ordered the chief eunuch to whip her. Another wife became intimate with a female slave. Uzbek flew into rage, but confused the facts, wrongly chastising an innocent wife in a letter. A wife named Fatne constantly missed him, yet Uzbek most longed for Roxana, the youngest. She believed Roxana most virtuous and loyal, unaware she secretly despised him. Unable to endure her husband's prolonged absence, Roxana took a lover, corrupting the harem and clashing fiercely with the eunuchs. In Uzbek's 9th Paris year, chaos erupted. The fierce Roxana poisoned several eunuchs before taking her own life. With letters taking up to 5 months between Isfahan and Paris, Uzbek's delayed responses rendered his orders useless. He sensed the harem's chaos but remained powerless. These letters reveal Persian customs, starkly different from the West. Extreme son preference, polygamy, slavery, and castration. Just as French customs fascinated Persians, these Persian traditions astonished European readers. So, Montesquieu used Uzbek's household to depict Persian society as absolute patriarchy. The master held supreme authority. Women, children, and slaves were property, like subjects to the emperor. Yet when absent, this order crumbled. As the book progresses, both protagonists deepen their observations. Uzbek kept pondering one question: what makes a good political system? His conclusion was that a well-managed society should prioritize morality as its primary mechanism. Governing through virtue represents the ideal state. In letter 80, he noted European nations like Holland, Venice, and England achieved higher civilization because they relied more on morality than harsh laws. There, people feel profound shame after just 8 days imprisonment or a small fine, never repeating the crime. But in Eastern nations like Turkey, Mughal India, and Persia, even laws mandating amputation for crimes don't deter offenders. Uzbek studied not just France, but closely observed other Western, Central, and Southern European countries. Through observation and comparison, Uzbek concluded European politics generally surpass Asian systems. The fingers against monarchs face exile in Europe, but execution in Persia for similar crimes. For instance, Europeans dissatisfied with their ruler would seek foreign allies to oppose him, whereas in Asia, dissenters directly assassinate the ruler, replacing him to continue autocratic rule. This comparison shows Western politics as gentler and more rational, while Eastern systems breed violence and ruler-subject alienation. Unlike Uzbek, Rika adopted a more micro perspective, focusing on street-level customs. He studied French fashion, speech patterns, and social etiquette. He eagerly learned daily conversations, what nobles, intellectuals, ladies, and commoners discussed across social strata. A social butterfly and linguistic genius, he constantly frequented gatherings, befriending diverse French people. Thus, Rika most admired France's intellectual freedom, gender equality, and open-mindedness. He marveled that 5 or 6 men and women could mingle freely at social events, unthinkable in male-dominated Persia. He noted Frenchmen not only practiced monogamy, but treated wives courteously at home, never dominating them arbitrarily, fathers to their children. The same applies to mistresses towards servants. Domestic disputes go to courts that don't favor faulty husbands, fathers, or masters. Rika deeply admires France's civilization. And just months after arriving in Paris, he told friends he felt more French than Persian. Though Persians increasingly affirmed France's virtues, Montesquieu refused to fuel French complacency or arrogance. As an Enlightenment thinker, his duty was critiquing reality, enlightening minds, and sparking reflection on societal ills. In Persian Letters, he achieved this through two main angles. First, broadening to all Europe, having protagonists discuss Britain, Holland, Venice, revealing France's flaws. For example, in Letter 104, Uzbek discusses Britain, which also has a king. But British royal power is strictly limited by constitution. The king can't abuse authority. Britons consider submission and obedience the least commendable qualities. Uzbek says treason is merely a charge slapped on the weak when they resist the strong. Yet, in Britain, people can declare their king a traitor. These words seem directed at the French. Montesquieu prompts readers, if a king governs tyrannically, what should we do? Second, even when protagonists address Persian backwardness, Montesquieu's real target remains critiquing France. This shines clearest in discussions of slavery. Earlier, we saw when a eunuch chief died in Uzbek's house, they selected a slave for castration to replace him. Though set in Persia, the scene reveals slaves' tragic vulnerability. Later, Uzbek revisits Persia's eunuch system. He calls slave castration unwise. Eunuchs guard harems, but mass castration prevents reproduction, causing slave shortages that weaken economic development. Uzbek's view here treats slaves as production tools, not human beings. This perspective moved many French readers. In fact, although France at the time didn't practice slave castration, slavery still existed. When Persian Letters was published, France had nearly 1 million slaves in its territories. Though smaller than Persia's scale, Montesquieu still deeply detested it. Montesquieu believed that as long as one slave existed in France, as long as Europeans traded slaves, and as long as Africans were captured and thrown into mines to extract gold and silver without regard for their lives, France remained a barbaric nation and Europe a foolish continent. In France, Montesquieu was the first to publicly oppose slavery, from Persian Letters to the spirit of the laws. Montesquieu gradually deepened and systematically condemned slavery. Denis Diderot, another leader of the French Enlightenment, praised Montesquieu's courage in the encyclopedia he edited. And in Voltaire's view, Montesquieu was the true leader of the Enlightenment. He admired saying, if anyone fought to restore everyone's inherent freedom and natural rights, if anyone battled for slaves of all kinds, it must have been Montesquieu. He opposed all forms of enslavement through reason and humanity. That's the essence of Persian Letters. Let's pause here. The novel's two protagonists, Uzbek and Rika, have dual identities. Sometimes they're Montesquieu's mouthpieces. The author uses them to express views and attitudes like criticizing the French king. But sometimes the protagonists themselves become targets of Montesquieu's criticism, especially Uzbek's attitudes towards slaves and women. By depicting Persian social customs, Montesquieu warns people and sparks French readers' reflection. On the surface, the novel features two Persians observing France. But Montesquieu's deeper aim is for French people to reflect profoundly on themselves through foreigners' perspectives. Uzbek and Rika's letters maintain a rational, calm tone, letting readers feel the Enlightenment spirit. Living in the fervent Enlightenment era, Montesquieu was indeed born at the right time. In the early 18th century, French monarchy decayed late stage, but speech was relatively free and society quite enlightened. Thus, France produced a group of Enlightenment thinkers who could criticize current politics, and their voices were taken seriously by the public. That's why Persian Letters, despite its satirical content about authorities, didn't bring Montesquieu severe retaliation. When publishing Persian Letters, Montesquieu was already president of the Bordeaux Parliament. By 1728, he was elected to the French Academy, the highest institution for French intellectuals. Every inductee is called an immortal, ensuring their place in history. After this, Montesquieu focused on research, completing The Spirit of the Laws in 1748. This monumental 600,000-word work proposed political theories like liberty, rule of law, and separation of powers, influencing the world profoundly. Truly, Persian Letters laid the foundation for Montesquieu's lifelong achievements. Montesquieu died peacefully in 1755, with France still calm at the time. But over 30 years later, France erupted in bloody revolution, monarchy toppled, king and queen guillotined. Looking back, French poet, philosopher Valéry reflected, though Montesquieu lived peacefully with good relations, Persian Letters unsettled minds, planted Enlightenment seeds, and quietly shook French society. After Montesquieu, Voltaire and others spread his ideas, igniting the Enlightenment across France. All right, that concludes our interpretation of Persian Letters. The reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.